Hello and welcome to Breathwood. My name is David Yates, and today I have a wicked head cold. But that doesn't stop me from playing the didge. Today I actually want to talk about the wobble. I find from student response, from comments on Facebook and elsewhere, that the wobble is still a bit of a mystery. And I think I can tell you why. So we've got the wobble and we've got the bounce breath. The way I see it, and there are probably other ways of looking at it, but the way I see it is that the bounce breath is a technique used to wobble. So let's start there. Bounce breath. What's happening there? Bounce breath is the technique in which you pressurize your mouth and then squeeze, but it's done in such a way that it feels like the pressure bounces back. So if you pressurize your cheeks and let them naturally pull back in, they almost recoil. That's the bounce. Of course, then there's a breath on the pressurization, on the squeeze. You can do it with the jaw. So fill and pressurize in one beat, in one syllable, and then squeeze and breathe on the next. Cheeks, jaw, throat, and the tongue is related to all of those because the very back of the tongue closes with the throat, where it goes into the throat. Some people have questioned the use of the word throat, whether that's the proper word or not, and I'm still trying to figure that out. I think it's the epiglottis area that closes in order to be able to breathe from the nose rather than from the lungs. From the nose into the lungs while you pressurize and blow from the mouth. There's a point there where you've got a couple different pathways. So we got to close off the air pathway to the mouth. And that happens in the throat. So that's the bounce. How do you speed up the bounce? By starting slowly. So if you're starting with cheeks, what you have to recognize is that you're fitting a lot in to a small amount of time. In one beat, not even a beat always, in one sound, in one moment, you're squeezing, you're filling your cheeks to create the squeeze. Okay? From your lungs and diaphragm. Then you have to squeeze, switch to an in-breath, close off the throat so that all works on the very next sound, and then on the very next one, switch again. So from one moment, you're squeezing the diaphragm, blowing out of the lungs, and the very next moment, you're breathing in. So you're breathing out, then breathing in, then breathing out, then breathing in. How can you practice that? Without the didge, it's something like this. And you'll probably find very quickly that this falls apart. You end up with too much or too little air. So out the mouth, in the nose. You may feel your throat get tired. If you're running into issues there, that's where the issue is. The speed of the throat, the strength of the throat muscle, the amount of air you're taking in or blowing out, those might not be balanced. To get there, you increase the speed slowly. You should hear two clear sounds and get a clear breath in for yourself. Another thing to remember, your didgeridoo might be working against you. This didgeridoo has a lot of back pressure, especially when it's not warmed up. The back pressure opens up and becomes a lot more fluid as it moisturizes, as I play it, and as it warms up. So it goes from being more difficult to play to being a lot easier to play. That might be the case with your didge. So if there's more pressure, that means back pressure, that means you're working harder to blow. If you're working harder to blow, you'll feel tired potentially faster. So what you think might be a lack of speed might just be a lack of muscle, but that's related to how much the didgeridoo is pushing back. And the back pressure is related to the inner structure of the didgeridoo and what kind of air resistance you feel from the inside. Something like a smooth PVC tube will offer a lot less back pressure than a termite hollowed eucalyptus didgeridoo, which has texture inside. So let's say you start to speed up to about that point. You're getting a clear push and then a clear breath. Push, breath. Pressure, squeeze. Pressure, squeeze. Do-wah, 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 do-wah. Kind of sounds like that. Do-wah, do-wah, do-wah. The next limitation to speed is how big your mouth movement is. If your cheeks are moving really far, you won't be as fast. That's way too much movement to get your speed up. So you want to start to minimize your movement. The smaller you can make it, the faster you can go. Now, don't worry at this stage about losing the circular breath or losing the drone. Minimize your movement and risk screwing up. That's okay. But see if you can circular breathe with less movement, less pressure. You need a lot less than you think, because we're not breathing like this. We want to breathe in a really small, quick, gentle way, like we're sipping wine, just a sniff. You can't hear it, but I'm breathing every time I squeeze. So smaller movement. The next limitation to speed is where we squeeze. I find cheeks to be a lot slower than jaw. That's not a perfect rule because there are some rhythms that I do quite a bit faster with cheeks than jaw. It might just be I haven't done jaw or throat breathing enough yet on those rhythms. But I find a bit more jaw and throat squeeze than cheek will be faster. So jaw. Ultimately, I don't think that's the best way to go faster, the fastest, because then your jaw has to do this the whole time. I think it's in the throat. The throat always has to open and close. No matter what you do anywhere else, it has to close so you can breathe. So that's the place to put your biggest focus. And what I feel like I'm doing on the inside of my mouth is so saying really fast. That's similar to the breathing exercise. So out the mouth open, in the nose with the mouth open. So working on that, working on the throat, the strength of your throat muscles will speed you up tremendously. But that's just the bounce. That's a 2-sound pulse. What's the wobble? From all the research I've done online, the wobble adds at least one more sound to the bounce. Most people, when they teach the wobble online, if they're to be trusted, are doing a 3-sound rhythmic pattern. Something like towa-a, towa-ha, towa-hi, towaki. So what I guess the wobble becomes in that case is the feeling of the bounce leading into more sound, other sounds on the didge. And maybe you need a minimum of 3 sounds to have this sense, this mental sense of the sound kind of wobbling back and forth between something like do-wa-a, 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 do-wa-a. Otherwise it's just do-wa, do-wa, do-wa. Maybe that's not wobbly enough to be called the wobble. So if we look at it this way, the wobble at its most basic is some variation of do-wa-a, do-wa-i. How do we speed that up? We start slow, and we go bounce and then ah, or bounce e. Feel pressurize, breathe in and squeeze, ha or e. With the mouth exercise, that would be and then we could add a t at the beginning. I find that a lot harder without the didge. I think it's because I'm moving too much air. Interesting. I'm thinking about other ways to help you speed it up. The ta definitely helps me. I end up feeling like I'm just going ta, 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 ta to start every 3 sounds. Ta-ng, yi, ta-ng, yi, ta-ng, 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 ta, 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 ta. So then my focus becomes on how fast the ta is. So if I just snap on the ta, there's a sense in my body of relaxation. So this is where video or a mirror is actually really helpful. If you see yourself start to tense up quite a bit in the neck, you can probably see me doing it a little bit at the highest speeds. If you're tensing up, you gotta back off. You gotta get to a point where you're sitting tall. The end of the didge is at the same height as your bum, preferably. You're straight, you're not playing down like this. You let your belly expand when you breathe in, rather than staying pulled in. So anytime you breathe in, your belly goes out. Your shoulders stay relaxed and hanging down. They don't come up here. You definitely don't breathe up here. And you'll start to feel eventually that the whole thing blurs together. It's not ta, ha. The ta gets you ready to breathe. So as soon as you've pressurized, you can breathe. You don't have to wait. As soon as you start, you can start to breathe. So that's another key. As soon as you pressurize, you can breathe in and get 2 sounds. It's possible to do that so close together that you get one sound. But our goal right now is the wobble, which has multiple sounds. So start to compress the timing between pressure and then squeeze, breathe. But then, as soon as you've breathed, you're ready to blow out again. That's also a wobble. A wobble doesn't have to be wobble, 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 wobble. It can be wobble, wobble, wobble. A rhythm with which I've talked about a lot, towa-i, towa-a, towa-do, something like that. Or towa-i, towa-a. No, towa-i, towa-a-do. We could call that wobble, wobble-do. Wobble, wobble-do. Towa-ha, towa-ha-do, towa-i, towa-a-do. Those are two wobbles. I'm feeling into what else happens when I go faster. Relaxation, everything's small. The breath is very light. It's just a sniff. There's barely any breath. If there's too much, you'll fill up. And then it feels like you can't breathe in anymore. You need to breathe out, which is another useful tip to sometimes you can breathe in or out on the circular breath. I've talked about that in other videos. And breathing out, by the way, isn't blowing out your nose, it's releasing air. So you want to switch from breathing in to sniffing. You almost can't hear it. And from breathing out to releasing. So that's the wobble. Those are some tips on speeding up the wobble. And I suggest you try something like, try this rhythm. Nice and slow. Try speeding it up a little bit. And when you've gained a little bit of speed, maybe using these tips, make a video. You know, just take if you have a phone, just take a phone and point it at the end or put it out in front of the Didge. Make a video, and on Didgeridoo Learning Community on Facebook, share a video of yourself playing the wobble, and the rest of us can give you some tips. So try this rhythm. Three wobbles and a sound. Towa-a, towa-a, towa-a-do. Towa-a, towa-a, towa-a-dee. Towa-a, towa-a, towa-a-do. Towa-a, 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 brr. Towa-a, 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 toot. Anything. And just to hear it faster. That just gives you an idea of what's possible, but play where you're at, be where you're at. And finally, I've started a Patreon account, and I'm super grateful to the 3 patrons who have already pledged to support me in creating more videos with more detail, going into a lot more depth with the things I teach. So One of the first videos I'll do for Patreon subscribers or patrons who subscribe to at least one video a month or 2 videos a month, you can see the different levels there, is how to integrate the wobble into several different rhythms. So I've shown a few here. There are so many more. So I'm going to do a video on just Wobble City. we'll go wobble crazy and do all kinds of wobble based rhythms. So that will be for Patreon subscribers. So check the link below, patreon.com/Breathwood, and check the links below for my other social media content, and please connect. Instagram, Facebook, join the Didgeridoo Learning Community. I would love to hear from you. So if you have any questions, comments, or feedback, let me know. And as always, thank you so much for watching. I love you guys. Happy playing.